panel here. We've got Darragh Kennedy, who is the Head of Cloud Services at Lonely Planet, sitting all the way to your right. We've got Scott Amyx, Managing Partner at Venture Capital. I will be leaving one space because we're hoping for one more panelist here, who is Masoud Charkhabi, who is the Senior Quantitative Analytics from CIBC. I believe he is on his way. That's what I was told earlier. He is making his way here. Hopefully he'll be able to join us in the panel. The topic of the panel is, what is the real power of data analytics? And probably what I'd like to do here is I'd like to ask each of our panelists to do a short introduction to themselves, and how does your company, and how do you relate to the topic of data analytics, and what are you seeing in the market? Darragh, let's start with you.
Well, good morning, or it's still morning, I think. So I've been working in mainly the cloud space for probably about the last 4 years since we started that journey. And I think what, a real benefit of that is how it improves us to basically look at our data, to analyze our data. We can do a lot quicker and a lot easier than we ever did before. Mainly by kind of using services that are built on the cloud. We want to focus on enabling people to travel and inspiring people to travel, and that data is very important. So we can put the resources in the right area and focus build products the correct way, by analyzing responses and stuff like that. So I think for us, data over the last probably 3-4 years has become incredibly important in terms of where we focus our resources and where the future lies for us as a company.
Just a small clarification there, Darragh. Lonely Planet, global company, so you've got a global audience that looks at the data, doesn't it? I mean, what sort of numbers are we talking about here of customers?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, we've sold over 130 million physical guidebooks. So over the 43 years that we've been in existence, and we have the oldest travel forum in the world, the Torrentry Forum, which has been around since 1996. So that you can imagine there's a huge amount of data and information that we can use to help travelers on that. And absolutely global. We print in around, I think, 20 different languages and have offices all around the world.
Thanks, Darragh. Scott.
All right, so my name is Scott Amyx, and I'm the managing partner of Venture First, as well as the CEO of Amyx Plus. Now, Amyx Plus, we actually specialize in data analytics. Matter of fact, later today at the awards, we're going to be picking up the Innovation Award for our work in something called human data analytics. So we are really a specialty when it comes to applying machine learning capabilities that looks at predictive as well as prescriptive data analytics, which I'll get into more.
Superb. I mean, let's look at the two companies that you work with and work for. So, are you at the early stage of that data analytics, or are you seeing this is just a trend that's been going on for a number of years? Where would you put yourself on a maturity scale at the moment? Scott, I mean...
Yeah, so I want to give you a little bit of flavor. So I spoke at the Coca-Cola headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia, a couple of weeks ago, and had a chance to speak in front of Marriott and Hallmark and Coca-Cola, of course, and some of the other CPG and retail brands. And what I can tell you from that perspective is that they're very early, and all of this is relatively new. They're still struggling with data warehousing and a lot of legacy issues that they have with their data residing in different siloed systems. So for them to even think about a centralized cloud that's ingesting heterogeneous type of IoT data and node data, it's somewhat beyond them. Now, let me juxtapose that with my recent visit and speaking in Dubai about 3 weeks ago or so, where I spoke on smart city initiatives on their panel, and I'll speak later end of today about smart city best practices. There, they've mandated open data initiative, much like we've seen with other nations. And what's interesting about open data initiative with Dubai in particular is they've actually made it into legislation. So the sheikh or the royal family effectively has mandated it as a law to externalize their data set. And that's very exciting, but also it's a big daunting task. Now, they've commissioned McKinsey Consulting to do quite a bit of work around some of the framework, but execution is going to be a big chasm. So what I'm trying to showcase is that there's a very broad range in terms of readiness, receptivity, and how they're looking to execute. And as far as what we do, we like working on really leading edge stuff. So we work on things that's not just centralized computing, but we work on decentralized computing, gossip protocols, BitNG, Ethereum. There was a mention around privacy. We're partnering with Miko. So there's a lot of things we push ahead, and we think that we're doing things that's pretty advanced. And of course, we're partnering with IBM. Later this week, I'll be helping to announce a big partnership that IBM has made with Cisco.
So I guess what I kind of say in terms of what we've experienced in the last kind of 4 or 5 years, and when we started this, I started going to these conferences and it was cloud. And I think what's really interesting is, we've got a queue to try and get into the IoT forum now. We've got, as Scott mentioned, kind of connected cities, smart cities, the industrial internet. So all these new areas that are basically been driven by the cloud. I think within a couple of years, hopefully there won't actually be an actual cloud conference because, we will maybe get to that commoditization. But from our perspective, where it's becoming really useful, and we're only playing maybe in the kind of machine learning space, and I wouldn't be quite an expert as Scott is, but if you look at things like VR and AR, that's going to be absolutely huge for the travel industry. The analytics and the data that you have to process. You look at what the cloud vendors are providing now. It's these kind of suites of services that you can knit together, really easily. So that real kind of further abstraction away from the complexity. We're not going to be talking about servers and storage and all that kind of stuff. We're going to be talking about more interesting things, which is products and solutions and ways we can help people to travel and to work and to play a lot easier. So that's what's, I think, really exciting for us, the way things are changing.
Absolutely great. What I'd like to ask the audience is, if you start thinking about 1 or 2 questions to the panelists, okay? But I'll ask probably the one question which so many people said and think about, and everybody talks about the presentations, IoT, data, and analytics. Easy topic, we know it, but we also know that it's fraught with challenges. Just taking that next step, taking that next technology, and so on. Maybe sharing some experiences from your side. What sort of changes have you had to do, both technologically and maybe culturally within the company? Darragh, if I...
Sure, and I think hand in hand with the journey we went on, I think we went through a large agile transformation probably back in 2007, 2008, and that meant we had to change that culture. We had to work differently, break down those silos. Around about the same time, and I think it's appropriate for this forum, DevOps came along, around about 2008, and we started to embrace that. So the cloud then came along as a technology that we were able to leverage because we had made those organizational and cultural changes, and that, I think that's within IT, that's usually the hardest thing that you'll experience. The technology is one thing, the people is the other thing. It's always the thing you have to work on harder. So I think it's been quite important for us to change how we work internally and how we build products.
So one of the things that we do is we stir the process from strategy to execution. And part of that, of course, to his point, is OD, organization development, change management. One of the things we're going to start to see, and you get to start to see a bit of a pushback from your organization, is a lot of the executive management steering committee are going to be pushing back on a different way of decision-making process. It used to be what they call HIPPO, which means the highest paid person in the office. But now we're going to be making decisions on a quantitative basis that's coming from the data itself. Now that's very interesting, and of course that's going to be a big change for people. One of the things that we're seeing, practically speaking, is for those that are actually experimenting with IoT data, they're pulling in all the data types and values. Now, when you don't have a theory or hypothesis in terms of how you're going to use the data, that seems like a plausible approach. However, what you're doing is you're essentially creating a large data lake. So you bring in all this massive data, and of course it's going to accumulate very quickly into the cloud, and you're going to have a mess. So one of the things that we're starting to see, and we're doing proactively, and we're also espousing and promulgating, is how do we start to do more data cleansing at the edge before it even comes to the cloud. So you're actually filtering that information so that the cloud environment is clean, and you can actually do some meaningful data with it. Now, the other piece of it that we're seeing is there's a big discrepancy between what we call data analytics and prescriptive data analytics, which is most of the big vendors that provide IoT platforms are just really sucking in the data to the cloud and then handle the roles, permissioning, and so forth. But they're really applying the old historical diagnostic data mining and basic stuff. That's interesting if you were interested in kind of what happened in the past. But where we are as a business is we need to be much more forward-looking and need real-time data to make decisions based on that. So we're starting to see things where neural network as a service, as an API service, is becoming readily available. So I would actually urge you to experiment with historical, past, diagnostic things, but also look at predictive and prescriptive, because ultimately you want to know if these conditions continue and you have the multivariate regression, how's it going to permeate into a particular outcome? And if it's positive, that's great. If it's negative, what can you do to mitigate that? More importantly, in the prescriptive side is you're starting to get into, if we want to achieve a certain top-line growth, what are all the variables that we need to make sure that's in place from a lever and driver so that we can actually actualize that? So I think there's a big, wide spectrum, and there's a lot of learning that needs to happen. I'll talk a little later about data science team and composition.
Absolutely great. I mean, I think one of the things you do realize in IoT data and analytics is it's not just descriptive analytics or business intelligence as the past, it's predictive, prescriptive analytics, which is now being at the fore. Maybe at this point I'll open up. Any questions from the floor at this point to the panelists? No. I'll continue with one then, because I think that there's another side to this. It's not just the machines that are providing the analytics, because there's been a large degree of talk about, well, we need more data scientists, we need more business analysts, and there is actually currently predicted lack of these sort of skilled resources. Is this something you're seeing, and what should enterprises, governments be doing to actually address this?
Yeah, certainly. I think if you change your job title to data scientist, you probably triple your salary overnight. So, there's obviously a huge shortage of skilled people, and I think it's a whole kind of economy-wide thing that we need to work on at a government level. I think from a company perspective, I'm a huge fan of that kind of internal training and promotion, and using graduates and stuff like that, and having a bit of a mix of trying to hire at the top and then try and build knowledge and skill within your organization. I think that's very, very important.
I was recently interviewed on this very topic, and one thing that we try to do is make it practical. Is when we work with corporations and our enterprise clients, is we will take the lead in terms of how to, but we'll ask their team members to come on board and start to learn and get hands-on experience. So that over time, what we want to do is transfer that knowledge over to them, and they start to create the right team composition and have a skill set and the experience to actually make it happen. Because one of the things about machine learning in particular is it's not a one-time transactional implementation. Rather, it's a set of models that you continue to optimize and hone over time. So it's an ongoing process, and that certainly is the case with data. The last piece of it is in terms of growing your data science team. I think it's important to work with external parties, and you'll find that certain individuals are a good fit for your culture, and you may start to appropriate and insource them into your team. That's one piece. The other piece I was going to talk a little bit about is about, I think, methodology, but maybe I'll just hold off to see if there's any other questions.
Sorry, there's a question. Sorry.
Louise Bennett, BCS. One thing I wanted to ask you that's really worrying me is that a lot of people in data science are producing what I would call spurious statistics. They're doing enormous correlations on vast quantities of poor data that mean nothing, and they're not considering causation rather than correlation. And I think it's in danger of bringing the whole area of data analytics into disrepute.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we've done is later on today we're going to receive an award on our work on human data analytics. And one of the things that we've done is, instead of just the correlation and the probabilistic approach, we've also looked at the attribution, meaning what are the contextual and situational things that's actually causing this behavior. I mean, that's a really important piece, and I think a lot of analysts are kind of missing that point because you can't attribute it. Well, you can't actually apply that correlation to what. Right?
Maybe in addition to that one, what kind of profiles are you looking for in your data analyst? Profile of people you're searching for.
In terms of hiring, look, I think that's a hard one because you need people that can understand different sides of the data. I think Scott was kind of mentioning the collection versus trying to actually analyze it, and then on a business level, you've got the science level on one side, and then the business level is the other. For us, because we're a small company, it's even harder because we're not going to have 3-4 different teams that are in certain spaces. So it's difficult, and that's why these people get kind of paid a lot of money. So where we can use certain services, we will, but eventually you just have to hire people that are really kind of multi-skilled from our perspective, or obviously go to consultants and stuff like that who can help on a daily basis.
Hi there, I'm Farah from Shapecast. So I work for a company that helps clients with their transformation, whether it's digital or cloud. So I guess question for Scott around the Lonely Planet cloud transformation journey. When you set out on this journey, what problem were you trying to solve? So where was Lonely Planet headed? What challenges did you come across? And similar question asked before, what sort of cultural and organization changes did you have to go through?
This is Scott.
Sorry, my apologies.
That's all right. Look, the problem was, we had devs working in one speed and ops working at a different speed. And I think the cloud is really the solution to enable us to work faster and to work in a more kind of agile fashion. I think the genius of the cloud when it started was it was very API driven. It was all about scale. Basically engaging with a huge amount of customers at the one time, and that then drove the automation that we were able to kind of leverage to do things a lot quicker. The organizational thing had started before that, just in terms of digital transformation. I think the whole company had to go through a huge organizational change from the top to the bottom. So a lot of challenges and war stories under the belt, but things are a lot easier now. Things are a lot more stable in this technology space, and it's definitely definitely been an interesting journey, but it's a lot easier now than it was kind of 4.5 years ago.
Do you want to add anything, Scott?
I was just going to come back to your question around profile. When we think about a data scientist team, it's not just folks that know regression and decision tree and Bayesian and those techniques. A good data science team is comprised of actually business analysts, UX, UI, product owners, product managers. It takes a holistic approach because you have a yin and yang effect where the data engineers will ask the business, what data do you want and why do you want it? And unfortunately, what happens is most projects start with, here's the data we have, what can we get out of that data? We have to ask the question, what are we trying to get out of, and do we have the right data sources, including exogenous data that's not part of the firm-specific data, but data that resides outside, whether that's Twitter, whether that's weather data, and whatnot. And then the technique and some of those engineering pieces come in at the later parts. Right?
I just want to make a comment. For the recent joiners here, it's not because I don't like the panelists, and that's why I'm sitting one chair away. We were waiting for one more panelist, but I'm actually, there's the perfect timing. I was just going to move to your chair. Masoud, welcome. Masoud, your timing is perfect because I was just going to take over your chair. And so, why don't you do a very quick introduction to yourself and how CIBC relates to the topic of power analytics and power data. So I know you've just come in. Thank you very much.
Sure, not a problem. Apologies for being late. So CIBC is a large Canadian financial institution, the 5th largest institution in Canada. I work in the Treasury department there, and Treasury does fundamentally 2 things for a financial institution. It helps gather funds and capital and allocate those funds and capital, and it implements hedging strategies, which means we take positions mostly to offset our natural positions. Since 2008, taking positions is frowned upon. I've been with the institution, the financial institution, about 10 years, my entire career. About half of that in IT, in data related roles, half of that in marketing. Actually, well, I'd say a third in marketing, a third in IT, and now the rest in treasury. Always in a role that had something to do with data analysis, data management, or using analytics to drive some type of financial service.
Great, thank you very much, Masoud. Question we had earlier, we were talking about analytical tools. We came into the discussion about machine learning, and machine learning not being a one-off, but actually one that you had to work with and model and develop yourself. Are we at the stage right now where really you would advise clients or customers or even your own organization to buy an analytical tool like a machine learning, or would you develop it yourself? Just it's almost the buy or make decision tree, and which route would you go?
Right, very good question. For those of you who are practitioners in this area, maybe you've done this for 10, 20 years, machine learning is not net new. It is an evolution of a series of techniques, and it's changed so much from its foundation in computer science and statistics that it actually justifies calling it something new. But so the question is buy or build. My opinion is biased because I'm essentially a builder, so I'd always say we should build ourselves. But if I try to remove myself from that and have an unbiased and real direct position towards this, I think you have to pick your battles. You have to pick places where it's worth it for you to build, that you think you're going to be able to create competitive advantages, that you think that not only will you have good chances of being successful, but if you are successful, you can maintain those gains and drive business out of that. That's probably not going to be in a lot of areas. So in banking, for example, I could say, maybe I could think of 3 to 4 different areas where you definitely want to build yourself. You do not want to buy. One would be anytime we're near making credit decisions, who to lend credit to, and that's proprietary. You should be better than everyone else at it. And even if you do buy something, what's going to happen is even if it's good, your seller, your vendor is going to go sell that to your competitor, so there's no net advantage of doing that. Another area I would say is in the area of derivatives pricing and positions pricing. That's extremely proprietary. You probably don't want anyone to even know about your positions, and you have to take full responsibility for those positions, so it's not appropriate and not strategic for you to try to buy that stuff. You should build it. There are other areas where I think you are probably okay to buy if you're in financial services. I'd say in the marketing domain, for example. I think consumers generally buy or purchase on momentum. So when they're trying to buy a home, they're usually trying to buy a whole bunch of other things like furniture, or their search results might relate to that. So if you start buying those solutions, I don't think you give away, as a financial institution, much of a competitive advantage, and I think you get a big gain, because there are really other institutions that have either more information, more experience they can bring to the table.
Scott, what would you advise your customers and so on?
I think my response would be, it depends. Before we even answer that question, I think there's a fundamental question that we need to ask first, which is your organization even ready to even purchase? And the reason is, what's the point of purchasing a tool if you don't have anybody that actually is knowledgeable? One of the biggest complaints we hear from data scientists is, we show the results to the business owners, and they have no clue what that is. So if you don't understand and can't even derive the interpretation of the data, what's the point of having a data analytics tool? Now, with that said, some of our clients, it varies. Some, where they're consuming IBM Watson API services. Others are doing HP data platforms. In other cases, we're building things on top of Apache Druid and doing custom data visualization. So it really depends. With that said, I think it comes down to doing things incrementally. I never think that it's not a big major investment. But start with POC, and then POC 1, 2, 3. MVP 1, 2, 3, 4, and then eventually what you're doing is you're experimenting and you're allowing for your team to grow and build capabilities in-house. The last part that I was going to impart from my experience is it's never about the tool, it's about the data. So even if you were to consume Google Analytics or Watson or anybody else, what you're going to find out is it's just a technique, but it's useless without the data. If you don't have the right volume of data and the right data types to train the system, you're not going to get the results.
Darragh.
I'd probably add a third category and say rent. You know, as Scott mentioned, you know, you have to be ready first, I think, and you know, don't just dive in because you know you've heard about this at a conference or something. You know, your business has to be ready, and a POC is a good way maybe to stick your toe in the water without you know a huge amount of investment. And obviously, machine learning is only you know one part of that puzzle. So.
I think that's right. I mean, I do believe there are opportunities of analytics as a service out there. We'll probably have to find out who they are providing this. Just out of curiosity, if you look at analytics now, and you look at some of the companies that you've, well, Lonely Planet or Scott companies you work with, or Masoud, your own company, what sort of results have you had, either tangible results or directly attributed to the power of data analytics in this IoT age? You know, not previously, but now, because new things that you actually implement.
I'll go first. Yeah. I think the value comes in two broad areas. One is through advice consulting. You're able to discover patterns or quantify something that you haven't been able to quantify in the past, and that shows up in broad strategies. The other way, I think, is in software, where you design something that might be quite back-end. Nobody really knows it happened, and it won't get as much visibility, but it only gets better. And I think a real simple example to explain that is maybe you've heard of the company Palantir, a big data mining company. They claim that they use a software to find Bin Laden. Right? It's very hard to say how much the software influenced that. Maybe it was somebody's creative ideas. It had some influence, but that's like a big finding that might come out of analytics. I think the other way that you could get value of analytics is what Amazon might do or Google might do. Every single thing they do, every time you search, every time you log in, some type of algorithm is learning just a little bit more and it's incrementally adding value. I find that more productive. I think that's when you can get to that stage where you've built in your algorithms and your analytics into software, and every day they will get better, and as people use them, they get better. I think that's what you should aim for. The discovery side, it's quite abstract. It's hard to attribute it to analytics. You might have almost discovered that anyway. I'm not sure if you would. So that's my position. I think go for software. Find systems that you can integrate analytics into, and those will only get better, and in the long term, they will have huge return on investment. And so in banking, those are just the things I described. They're anything to do with quantifying positions, so derivatives pricing, anything to do with credit adjudication. These are things where if you do them right and you implement strong analytics in there, every day you'll get value out of that, and they'll only get better.
Darragh, just on that point, just taking maybe the other side, what have you seen in terms of your customers of Lonely Planet, their demands on you as an enterprise using data? Have you seen the same thing, like the Amazon search or?
Well, I guess it's a similar point. Is that what the data allows you to do is tell you you're building the right thing, and so you get really quick feedback. So whether you're using kind of A/B testing or whatever, I think traditionally we've built a lot of software, a lot of lines of code that never really get executed. Whereas now I think using analytics, we can use, Scott mentioned that MVP model, so it's all about iteration and continual improvement. I read a very interesting example of something that Netflix are now doing, and they're a great example of a company that's using data in the right way, where they launched their new Daredevil series. And a couple of years ago, it would have been 20 people locked away in a war room to make sure the whole thing didn't fall over and what. But now they basically have the UX guys in the room. They experiment with 20 different images initially over the first couple of weeks. Within a couple of days, they have that down to 5. and then eventually they set themselves on one kind of image that's going to attract people to click on the show and use the show. So when you get to that maturity and you're actually using analytics to help drive your business, at that small kind of daily level, I think that's where the real benefit and the power comes from.
Open up to the floor again. Any questions from the floor to the panelists? Sorry, John.
How do you work with customers? And I mean, if you're in the, or so as a customer that wants to work in a kind of iterative DevOps type of model, it's very difficult to engage with technology companies that want to work with you that way. How do you guys approach that? I mean, do you just have to kind of build stuff yourself to be able to work in that model, or are there companies that will engage you that way?
Yeah, so let me address that. I think because I come from large enterprise space, but at the same time we run a smaller company, mostly made up of PhDs. Because we recognize the need for the desire for experimentation and incremental transformation, we very much work in that model. We rarely come in and say, let's do a large, multi-million-dollar, multi-year project. But we say, well, let's have a hypothesis and a certain state of benefit and KPI we're looking to measure. And we go for a certain methodology that allows for you to have a gates approach, but still that's very much agile and Google's latest sprint model, where you could even develop something within 5 days from concept to actual results and be able to get that in front of users for feedback, as an example. So you get early wins, and that gives you the metrics and to go back to the steering committee to show them something that's tangible so that you can actually have larger projects and proceed.
Any other questions? Otherwise, let me round up the panel. One final question to the panel here. Next 2 years in IoT data and analytics, what do you see as being the themes or the new technologies or the new points that the audience should actually be aware of and keep an eye on? Masoud, let me start with you.
I can speak for banking, I guess, more than anything. I'd say one of the main roles of both marketing or front-end groups and back-end groups like Treasury are to create scenarios, create a lot of alternatives, and then optimize between those alternatives. And today, because of all the constraints, not a lot of those alternatives are explored. They're not created because you don't have the time to look at them, you don't have the software, you don't have the know-how. I think what's starting to change is that a lot more of those alternatives are being looked at. And that could fundamentally change the way banking works. I think in those alternatives is where innovation lies.
Scott?
It's interesting, I had a meeting with a partner of ours called Miko. They're based in London and Australia, and they work on privacy, identity management. One of the things you're going to start to see in the next few years, and it's already happening now, is data analytics just doesn't reside on an island. It has to work with security and has to work with privacy. They go work hand in hand. So when you think about a large project like a smart city initiative, you're touching on not just PII information, but you're touching on things like people's water usage, their tax bills, lots of behaviors and lots of nuances and subtleties that you're starting to touch on. So there needs to be a way to manage the privacy, the identity piece as a core competency. That doesn't necessarily reside within data analytics, but let's say in the context of, let's say, blockchain as an example, it basically provides attestation. So yes, this person is authorized to have this access. Yes, this person is authorized to give this information for this period of time. So that's the kind of context. The security also is another piece, is when you think about a smart city or a very large initiative, where you have potentially very different devices, different standards and protocols, and lack of interoperability, you have to account for the security aspect. And one of the things that I think is very unfortunate is we hear in the press releases lots of big firms coming in with their IoT platform and security, but if you look under the hood, they're really the traditional security approaches that does not address the fundamental differences of IoT. So for example, unlike the traditional security concerns, IoT is something that's always on. It's always connected, and it's vulnerable to playback attacks as an example. The other piece of it touches on many nodes. So in the case of a P2P or peer-to-peer mesh network environment, he needs to go do multi-hops before actually goes to the gateway into the cloud. So it means that all those little hops, all those connectivity have different standards and protocols, and they're subject to vulnerability. There's a lot of nuances that's specific to IoT that needs to be handled differently. The old way of doing things is not good enough. So I think the three pillars are data, privacy, and security.
Thanks a lot, Scott. Darragh?
Look, I think the disruption is only getting started. I think who mentioned the banking industry. It's these new kind of leaner, quicker companies that are bringing this innovation, and they're taking on the older, less agile ones. And I think blockchain is, just hearing some creative ways blockchain has been used already. I think it's going to be a very important part to that privacy and security space.
And on that note, I'd like to join me to say thank you very much to Masoud, Scott, and Darragh. Thank you.